Hello and welcome to the January 2012 edition of Third Thursday, brought to you by the good folks at Moby Wireless Management. I'm your host, Matt McIntyre, Marketing Manager at Moby, and with me today is Moby's lead billing analyst, Scott Nye. Thanks for being here, Scott.
You're welcome.
Now, before we get started, if you're new to Third Thursday, Moby Wireless Management creates videos released on the third Thursday of every month to help bring a single topic of wireless management into focus. The goal of these videos is simple. Share some clear-cut information so you can improve your wireless mobility program today. If you have any questions after today's episode, feel free to tweet us at Moby Wireless or call 855-259-6624. Now, on to our topic. 3 ways to save 5% on your wireless bill. Scott, I know everybody seems to identify zero-use lines in their program, but what are the fears associated with canceling those devices?
Yeah, there's a few common roadblocks. One issue is concerned that are we even looking at the right lines? So one step we take at Moby is not only do we just analyze the bill and look for people who have shown no usage as the carrier's reported on the bill, but then we'll actually ask for an explicit usage report or zero use report from the carrier, bounce them up against each other and say, how does our interpretation of all the bill data compare with their estimation of what zero use is? It's a minor step, but if it weeds out just a couple people that slipped into either report, that's big to not shut off someone's usage. Another problem area can be there's a lag between when you get the data, can analyze it, make a decision, and then are able to finally flip the switch on turning it off.
Like how long of a lag would you say?
Well, if it takes, say, a week for the bill data to become available, and then give yourself a couple days to put it together, analyze it, at least 2 weeks to make a decision. But if there's any kind of complication in there or communication delays, you're talking about a month easily. So that lag is a time when someone could pick up an air card or a spare device and start using it. Or someone finds one and reassigns it to an employee, something like that. The fear is, in that lag time, people start using the devices, then we shut off their service, cause more headaches. The step we take to kind of mitigate that, you can't completely eliminate it, but to mitigate it is instead of just outright canceling the line of service, suspend it first and then have it cancel at the cycle date. And the advantage is as much logistics as just eliminating a mental block. If you tell someone, I'm sorry sir, your line got canceled, that's like red alarm bells going off. What's going on? Do I lose my number? Do I lose all these contacts? Whatever the concern is, it's an unknown for people. But if you just tell them line suspended, give me 5 minutes to call the carrier and get it turned back on and we'll get this line assigned to you, that's a lot easier to stomach. So that's one fear and another way that we overcome it. There's also a legitimate concern about ETFs. If you're running low on waivers or if you don't have waivers or if you're saving them for something else, ETFs are a big concern, but still there's a pretty simple break-even analysis you can do there and say how many months should I keep paying my monthly service before the ETF is the same cost. So I rarely suggest that someone cancels all of their zero-use lines because paying hundreds in ETF is not worth just dragging it out a few months to see if someone starts using it. Along those same lines, people like to say, well, I want to keep these lines around as a backup pool. That's a common idea, and it's a great idea. The problem is people don't always follow through. But better yet, people rarely follow through. It's easy to say it's a good idea, let's not cancel them, I'm going to use them as backups, and then never actually get around to activating them.
Got it. So they just sit there and waste money.
Yeah, they just sit there and they continue to order new lines of service for new employees. They continue to pay full cost for a new device when someone drops theirs and it's not up for renewal. And there's that disconnect. You're continuing to pay money for new devices and you still pay for these zero-use devices and you never actually make the connection. That really is a logistics thing, keeping good track, having good control over your procurement process to make sure that users, when their phone breaks, they don't have the option to automatically upgrade with the carrier, pay for a new device. That there's some intervention there and a control piece where you can make sure that procurement uses the least cost option, which could be a zero-use line.
Got it. Great. Let's get into something that I think is much less common among mobility managers out there in enterprises is really identifying and taking a second look at the different taxes associated with the wireless bill. What are some quick ways to be able to capitalize on taxes, and how do you see that affecting the program overall?
Yeah, taxes are a little bit of a gray area, especially when it comes to optimization. People don't always realize this, but the taxes that a line is charged, even if they have overage and they're getting charged taxes on that overage, it's not necessarily based on where they used it. The taxes for their monthly recurring charges aren't based on where they used it. They're not even based on the billing account address.
Wow.
There will be an individual, it's called a subscriber address, tied to every phone number.
Every number.
Every phone number will have a subscriber address, and you can request that list from a carrier and look through it. The gray area comes in the fact that the law says that address should be the primary place of use for that line of service. So you don't want to just mass change everybody's address to your cheapest tax bracket you can find, some county in some state where it happens to be really low. That's taken it a little too far, but it's definitely good to be aware and see where people's taxes are being calculated based off of, especially if you've got sales folks that are traveling, or anyone that's relocated. There could even be a situation where a carrier is always ordering the lines with the same subscriber address, perhaps the billing address, corporate billing address, and that could be relatively expensive and not reflect each individual's location.
Corporate headquarters rather than where they travel individually, right?
Right, or where their usage is based. So looking at what the different tax rates are, where the people are actually located, and going through and adjusting every subscriber address, tax rates can vary between, say, 5% and 20%.
Wow.
Because you've got local and municipality taxes in some states, you've got county taxes sometimes, you've got state taxes, obviously, and then the federal taxes. It really makes for a complicated mess sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's worth taking the time to look at, because there can be some significant savings there.
So Scott, another common area where people seem to overlook or maybe underemphasize is messaging. And I don't mean just by messaging overages, I mean by potentially identifying underutilization and making adjustments based on that. What are some suggestions you have to accomplish that or identify that?
Yeah, well, first let me say I love when we can look at people's messaging because it's so isolated. There's not pooling text plans. You can look at each individual's usage and their patterns and make an individual decision. It's not complicated by what account are they on and do they pool with other people, that sort of thing.
Great.
It's also pretty consistent usage. There's not a lot of variance in a person's texting pattern unless they first discover how to start texting. They might send a couple a month and then they get a new phone or something like that and they're sending a few hundred or a few thousand. When there's changes, they might be big swings, but then it's pretty steady state. Now, what you're mentioning as far as how to optimize, whether we're just looking at overage or whether we're also looking at underutilization, that's an important distinction. It's common for an administrator to just come in, look at a bill and say, what's my messaging overage? But you're right, you could be missing a whole section of users that are on a more expensive plan with a relatively large allowance when they don't really need it. So if you've got someone who's always just using a few hundred text messages, they don't need to be on unlimited. You can put them on 250, save $15 a month. And when you do that for hundreds or thousands of users, it really adds up. The dangerous part about only looking at text overage is that your account is going to trend towards higher and higher plans. And eventually, you're always, and as soon as someone has a spike, you're going to bump up their plan. And then if you're not making a regular habit of going back through and looking for underutilization, they're going to stay at that plan. And maybe it was cost effective for a couple months, and then if their usage comes back down, you never catch it.
Now, why would they spike like that? What would be a reason?
Well, that's all just, that would depend on the business case of the person, whether they go on a trip or their kids get a cell phone and start texting them, or other
changes.
changes.
Keyboard.
They get a new keyboard, that could be it, or just something as simple as maybe other people changing carriers. A lot of carriers will give you free text messages to other people on the same network. So you could have someone who's using thousands of messages a month, and then some of their primary contacts switch to the same carrier, and suddenly their requirement for purchase messages goes way down. So, you could talk through any number of scenarios. That's not the point. The point is that looking at only overage is leaving out a big piece.
Doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, and that underutilization can save a lot. So, when you first suggested, hey, let's do a third Thursday on 3 ways to save, you asked me that question, but what I hear is let's find 3 easy ways to save. Simple. And that's what I like about messaging is it's very chunkable. You don't even have to look at your entire account if you don't want to. You could just pick out 100 lines and go through and find out what plan are they on, what's their pattern, let's make changes on 20. You could do that every month and get through the account in however long, or whatever size chunks you need to do it in, you can do it. And it's so segmented, it allows you that flexibility.
Great. Well, Scott and I want to thank you for being on Third Thursday this month. And just to kind of recap what we discussed, identifying zero usage, capitalizing on tax benefits, and of course, the underutilization and overutilization of messaging. So thanks again for all of you for joining us on this edition of Third Thursday, brought to you by Moby Wireless Management, and we'll see you next month.